And going back to our main story about the legacy of the former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, whose mortal remains were consigned to flames today with full state honours, a solemn occasion. We are joined by K.V. Prasad, senior journalist, to tell us more. Mr. Prasad, how would you remember Dr. Manmohan Singh?
To me, I think as a person who's seen Indian politics for the last 30 years, 40 years to be precise, I feel Dr. Manmohan Singh can be his whole life in terms, apart from his early life as academic and all. Ever since he came into public office, he pulled out India, or he served India in two difficult and very challenging times in different centuries. When I say centuries, in the previous century, when he was 91, 96, he was the finance minister of the country when the country was facing immense financial issues, and everybody knows about, and how he turned around the Indian economy under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. And then in the year 2004 to 2014, when he was the Prime Minister in this century, when he led the coalition government of the Congress party, he led the Congress party. So here I would look at his three broad things. One, the political phase of his life in this 30 years. Then the economist reformer as he began his career into politics. And finally, as a prime minister who had overarching issues, dealt with majority of it. And of course, as an architect of the foreign policy, which set a course as we are going ahead, Mark.
Right, indeed. And as the Prime Minister, one would think that foreign policy played a significant role, and he himself said that when he was asked, when he was demitting office, what would he like to be remembered for, and he said the Indo-US civil nuclear deal. To what extent, did this actually change India's profile internationally?
I think, Mark, that was a very, very watershed moment in Indian diplomatic history. Why so? Because one, we were a nuclear pariah state. India was declared India was facing nuclear apartheid. And here a person came up with a policy where you segregated the military component of the nuclear energy and the nuclear energy, and got on board one of the most powerful countries in the world at that point in time. It was almost unipolar. The United States of America backing India under President George Bush. And George Bush did the heavy lifting, not just with the US Congress, to change their own internal laws. And those were very, very difficult phases. Right. And I can also say this because I actually worked in the US Congress at that point in time as a Fulbright Fellow in the year 2007, 2008. So I know some of the internal arguments that were going on within the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the nuclear proliferation leaders who didn't want this deal with India at all. So it was a very, very and it changed the way, of course, India-US relationship took it to a very next higher pedestal.
Right, and on the national front, we can look at the Right to Information Act, as well as the NREGA, or the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. These are significant.
And the National Food Security Act.
And the Food Security Act also.
Basically the rights-based issues
and
the
with the Education Act as well, the free education.
Right to education. So the government's commitment was springing out of the Constitution to take it to the rights-based. It was no longer just a law, legality, but a constitutional right that the people of India were guaranteed. And that, I think, made a significant shift it takes forward from where the country was, a country whose constitution believes in social welfare. We are a welfare state. And I think all these took to the next level of governance, Mark.
Right. But one would say that, as Prime Minister, he led a coalition and he was not quite in charge, some would think, because there was a superstructure that handled the politics of it. And what would you think? I mean, did he give enough space? He was not micromanaging the entire cabinet, and perhaps people were pulling in different directions. And that led to the downfall of the UPA in the second term.
Well, Mark, I think all those characteristics did mark out the UPA, especially in the second term, the UPA 2. But remember, UPA 1, 2004 to 2009, the government performed as a coalition. except when the left parties went out on the nuclear deal issue. But this guy, he staked this for somebody who's been said that he's soft. He was soft, yes, but he was firm. And that firmness he showed, the determination of the prime minister to get his thing done, was the nuclear deal when he staked his own government and said, come what may, this deal has to go through and there's no going back. So that was a firmness demonstrated. And that results, whatever it is, in 2009, the Congress party got much more seats than it had in the previous coalition. But yes, the compulsions of coalitions were always helming him down because different parties, as you all said, also within the government, within the own Congress party, there were leaders who had their own ideas. Right. So to get them together, and Dr. Manmohan Singh was more of a consensus builder. He was not take my idea and push it down. He would rather take everybody on board and try and build a consensus in a parliamentary democracy. That is what has always been his style of working.
Right. Indeed, and as an economist, he first worked, of course, as a technocrat, brought in a lot of ideas. Then as finance minister, he applied a lot of those ideas at a time when, the world was also going through a lot of change. The Soviet Union had collapsed. Our economy was in bad shape. But in all those reforms that he brought in, whether they call liberalization, reduced taxes, new industrial policy, devaluation of the rupee, privatization of various government sector firms, all this over a period of time has led to he achieved growth of about 9% at various levels when he was prime minister. So, what would you look at him from the economics point of view?
Well, Mark, I think one of the most significant, we all know the way he liberalized the economy, what was known as the LPG, the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, the LPG model that was brought about. Of course, the Manmohanomics were also criticized for various aspects. And that is why in the 91-96, when the Congress government lost its majority, they could not come back to, when they did the rethink, went over this economic policies, they said, reforms were necessary, but with the human face. And that trickle-down theory, they realized did not work. And that's why you had increasingly social welfare measures being built into government system. But Mark, one thing I would always remember him, because very early in his first term, as the only term as the finance minister in 91-96, I remember somewhere in 93-94, I read a paper where he talked about the integration of the entire banking system in the country. And that time it looked like, what are we looking at? And that launched what was known as a core banking solution or core banking system. And today, 30 years down the line, all of us know the seamless manner in which we do bank transactions across bank platforms, irrespective of the bank account you have or I have or anybody else has, the seamless transitions that happen. This is a visionary situation using the technology for the benefit. Similarly, of course, there have been talks. The Aadhaar understanding of bringing this technology was initiated in his term as prime minister. The DBT came up. It was just it took baby steps. So some of these steps today, we accept it so naturally. But the foundations or the initial pipelines were laid around the time when he was the prime minister of this country, Mark. And so in fact, I think everybody talks about the banking sector reform, the kind of strict norms that came up during his term. The banking regulations and other things got tightened. The SEBI got more powers. So the financial markets and other things were looked at in a rather holistic manner. So some of which most of us are now enjoying the benefits of those technological innovations that are adopted in governance models.
Indeed. Now, a final word on the method that he chose to. Many people said he was too silent. He didn't speak enough. But even when he was in Parliament, when the government was out of office, when their government was out of office, he probably only spoke when he was asked to by the party. And even in office, though he gave several press conferences, one wasn't very sure, how articulate his point of view was. So, how would you gauge this? We probably know his mind, that he was a very brilliant man, and that's what everyone says. All the world leaders too are remembering that. But perhaps, as a politician, he wasn't able to convey that to the people of the country, that what was on his mind.
Mark, I'll answer your in two parts. Part number one, I remember when I was in one of the newspapers, The Hindu, and I was covering the Rajya Sabha, and I went to meet him since he was the leader of the opposition. I sent in my request to meet him, and he was very kind enough. We spent some time talking various things, and just about as I was about to leave, he said, "Mr. Prasad, you are most welcome to come up to my office to seek anything you want in pursuit of your professional work. But there is a caveat or something to that effect." I said, "What is it, Dr. Sir?" He said, we can discuss anything but politics." So, and I kind of smiled and said, "Sir, but my economics is not good to, to even test, to come close to you." Anyway, that was but let me tell you, I was him in parliament, both as a leader of opposition, not so much as a finance minister, but more in the leader of opposition and also as a prime minister. There were times he would sit through the debates, listen attentively, and if somebody from the opposition or the other side of the aisle made a point which he thought required, an actual interpretation or what the government was thinking on it, he would immediately get up. I mean, he would listen to debates for hours together, sitting in parliament, and you thought probably one wondered whether he was listening at all, but no. And there were times when his junior ministers were answering questions, and there were a fusillade, a volley of questions coming from the opposition. He would get up and make the intervention, and that was the end of it. So it was not that he didn't want to speak, but he was a man of few words. He didn't want to, make public about what he was doing. He always believed the concept that his work should speak rather than him.
Right. We leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. K.V. Prasad. Thank you for those insights into the life and the legacy of Dr. Manmohan Singh.